Imposter syndrome can be defined as the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. People can feel that their success is based on pure chance, luck, or even worse, a total mistake. These feelings can be particularly hard to deal with, especially at a university like Cambridge. It can seem as everyone is highly intellectual and secure in their place at the university. There can also be cultural challenges when you are placed in this new environment.
We also recognise that this year has been particularly hard for freshers. From not being able to sit your exams to the unfair algorithm, you may feel like your grades have been simply dictated to you and you never got the chance to prove yourself. And so this video aims to let you know that so many students at Cambridge experience imposter syndrome across their whole time here, not just, in the first couple of weeks. And we want to reassure students that their university place is deserved and that they can flourish in Cambridge.
I'm Priscilla. I'm a second year student studying HSBS at the University of Cambridge. For me, I think the first time I really felt imposter syndrome in that regard was definitely in the first few weeks at Cambridge. I think that's the case for most people. So for HSBS, for the Poll 1 paper, which is the politics paper, most people do their first essay on Hobbes' Leviathan, and that's quite an old and long and complicated text, and I just kind of felt so lost. It seemed as if everyone else had done all the pre-reading over summer and I really didn't do much pre-reading. I actually had to use SparkNotes to even understand what Hobbes was talking about. So I kind of said to myself, well, this isn't Cambridge material. If you're having to use SparkNotes to even decipher a text, how are you meant to write an essay and have a solid opinion on this? And that was kind of the wrong mindset to have altogether. Firstly, I kind of forgot the fact that Hobbes is a very hard and Leviathan's a very hard text to do for your first essay, and there's no way that you can write a perfect essay for your first attempt. Secondly, I'd also assumed that other people weren't struggling. So as I got to know the people at my college on my course a bit better, I realised that they also found stuff hard. There were also texts that they couldn't decipher, and there were also essays they found difficult. So I think that really helped me kind of further along get over my imposter syndrome in that regard, because as I got closer to the people at my college on my course, I found that they were also struggling sometimes. And that's probably the first tip I'd give you, which is to really kind of try and form those connections with people on your course, especially at your college, because that was such a comfort system for me. I'll also say maybe in terms of organisation as well. So I found that the times when imposter syndrome would maybe creep back in throughout the year was when I hadn't been that organised with my time, and I found myself having to maybe stay up late to finish some reading or to write an essay, and then I think, well, this isn't what the typical Cambridge student should do, you should have it all together, when it was ultimately just because I hadn't maybe been as organised with my time. So that's also something maybe more practical that can also help you guys get over that imposter syndrome. And I think also don't let your degree consume you. So if your degree is kind of the only thing that you do, it's very easy to think that a failed essay or some struggles with reading is the end of the world. But if you also make time for your friends, talking to family and friends at home, even getting rest or joining societies, then if something's going wrong in your academic life, it doesn't feel like you're a failure or it's the end of the world, because there are also other things to take your mind off of the degree. And whilst at the start it might be difficult, you will eventually get into the swing of things. So like if I'm looking at the books behind me, I just finished writing an essay on Plato's Republic, and if a year ago you told me I'd even be able to understand what Plato was talking about, I would have laughed at you. But now I was actually able to read it, understand it and write an essay on it in a short amount of time.
Hello, my name is Emma and I'm a second year studying English, and I'm also the president of the 93% Club Cambridge, because I think money is something that a lot of students that come from like class act backgrounds or less privileged backgrounds stress about a lot, especially when you've got your student loan. It's a lot of money coming into your account all at once. You've probably never had in your account before that amount of money, so it's a lot to deal with all at once, and setting up like a proper budget can really help in just making sure that you stay on top of things and you've got money at the end of the year, and you're not just living off of pasta every single day. So I guess budgeting doesn't need to be like the most stressful thing in the world. Like you can literally download like Yolt, for example. It's a really helpful app. You just set up your budgets really quick. You don't need to do like a whole Excel spreadsheet. But if that helps you, then do that. I'm just not very kind of techie, so a simple app is quite helpful. The other thing is to keep an eye out for student deals. Always check, like if you're going out with friends, try and go to a place where you know you're going to get a student discount. Get like uni days, obviously, student beans. There's so many like discount apps that you can get for eating out.
Hey guys, my name is Harry. I am a third year English student at Girton College, and I'm also secretary of the 93% Club. I hope to share with you some interesting top tips about what it's like to be a first generation student at Cambridge from a state educated background. Often you hear these bits of advice that are sort of like negatively framed, like don't do this, don't do that. What I want to try and do is reframe these in the light of what it's like to be a first gen student here at Cambridge. So the first don't I want to try and reframe today is don't try to do everything. Often this is something you might hear from your tutors, perhaps a director of studies at the beginning of the year. You might also hear it from family or friends even sometimes. And I want to reframe this particular phrase as prioritise growth above perfection. Studying for a degree is very much something that you can take on your own terms in as far as your course lets you, of course. But in terms of time, it's something that you can take on your own terms. And I think as a result, as first-gen students, particularly if you've been at the top of your class in school, you've been someone who's renowned for being a really hard worker, you have the most incredible revision notes and, pride yourself on your ability to study. I think sometimes there's a tendency, certainly was in me, to completely go all in and just try and do everything you can. Next point is don't burn out. And it's like, well, it's all very well and good saying that to someone, but what does it actually mean? Well, of course, you may have experienced burnout before. Burnout is very, very serious. Sometimes you may just be really, really tired from an amount of work you've done or a really, really busy week here. But burnout is obviously very, very serious and can actually potentially be quite dangerous. What I would rather say at this stage is be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. Talk to other people if you're struggling. It makes a world of difference. And the structure of your welfare system at your college, so tutors, also director of studies if it's an academic issue, but tutors especially are wonderful. They're there for a reason. There's also, of course, the university counselling service if that's something that you think might be necessary. But I've always found that if you have friends that you can trust, to just be open with them, be honest about what it is you're struggling with, because just getting it out there and in the open is the first step usually, and often is the most important step, being that first step in getting to a stage where you're more comfortable with whatever it is bothering you, is giving you anxiety or generally worrying you. But one of the manifestations of academic imposter syndrome is the sense that you've got to be seen as perfect all the time, that somehow you're on top of everything, you're at the top of your game. I think vulnerability is actually so important, and we have to first recognise that in ourselves. And I think when it comes to first generation students in particular, that willingness to admit one's own vulnerability is really, really hard, really hard, because you've worked so hard to get here and you might perceive it as a failure to admit that you're struggling. It's not. It's simply not a failure. You're putting as much effort as you can into what you're doing, and that's admirable. And you take pride in that fact first of all, but then realise that it is okay. You may have heard this one before, but it is okay not to be okay. But the most important thing is that we do something about that and we talk to people. So the last of our don'ts that I want to reframe today is don't spread yourself too thin. This one is probably the least useful statement that you could possibly offer to a first-gen student in my experience, because there is a lot of, whether it's subconscious or totally conscious, a sense of what you want to get out of this experience, what it means to you, what it means to your family for you to be here. All of these things are kind of, whether they're in the foreground or the background, they're always there with you. And sometimes, and it certainly was the case for me, it meant throwing myself into absolutely everything that came my way and never saying no. And while that isn't necessarily a problem, at least initially, you're going to need time, like I said in my previous point, to have a moment to slow down, a moment to take a break. And I think what I would encourage you most of all is to remember, if we're reframing that phrase, don't spread yourself too thin, to remember that you are enough. You're at this university for a reason. It's not an accident, it's not a fluke, and you are here, you've earned your place. So by all means, if that means wanting to be part of a sports team and be in a play, great. If that means that you want to just do your degree, solely your degree, and not do any other activities, also great, if that's what you want to do. And again, it's like reframing things in that light. Is this what people expect me to be doing while I'm here? Or is this what I actually want to be doing while I'm here? And if the answers are always the latter, and you're still really, really busy, then great. But that's because you enjoy those things. I think just remember, you are enough. You'll always be sufficient, right? You don't need to be trying to do so many things in order to either fit in or be seen as, as worthy of your place.
Hi, I'm Elia and I'm a second year natural scientist at Clare. I started experiencing imposter syndrome probably before I even started, I think probably just as soon as I got my offer, it was kind of like the sort of feeling like, oh, did they like make a mistake? Did they pick the wrong name? Kind of all that sort of stuff. And that lasted all the way up until I got to Cambridge, and still, I think when I started, it probably got kind of different but worse, I think. And I think that's because like in the first, like for example, 2 weeks of term, you're suddenly like, you've gone from probably like, you know, a long break or a break out of education, for example, summer holidays, and you're kind of going into this environment where you're just going to be like given lots and lots of work and just kind of not as much time. Like you start feeling overwhelmed and you start getting stressed, like, oh my gosh, am I meant to be here? Am I gonna make it? Am I gonna last? And I feel like all those are fairly common thoughts, sadly, but yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that I feel like you kind of need to remind yourself, like, they chose you at the end of the day. They saw something in you that they thought would like fit right, like well here, and you'd be okay. And like, even if you need support, for example, I have like mental health issues, so I get support from like the DRC, which is the Disabled Students Resource Centre, and like other like people. And even then, that's still okay. Or I used to always think that like needing extra support was like a bad thing, but it's really not. And you shouldn't feel ashamed of it in any way. I think it's really important to not compare yourself to other people. At this university, that can be a really bad thing to do, because you will come across those people who seem like it's going absolutely fine. And I like bear in mind that even if in the people that it looks like that, you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. So it's important to remember, like, whatever you see might not be the case. People are not comparable. Like, you're all in your different situations and doing your different things. So I'd avoid that, and that also helps, I feel like, with imposter syndrome.
I think as well, I felt a lot of kind of imposter syndrome about my status as a state school student. I remember as it came up in conversation, kind of the question, what school did you go to? And people were like, yeah, I went to Harrow or Rugby or these really, really big prestigious schools. And my kind of local comprehensive in a bad area felt really, really silly in comparison. And I remember this like thought went through my mind like, oh, I don't deserve to be here because I wasn't made for Oxford. And I think you just have to remember, just because you went to a state school doesn't make you any lesser of a Cambridge student.
So as we said at the start of this video, COVID-19's completely disrupted the applications process this year. And although you may not feel like, because you didn't get to sit your exams, that you can't justify your place here or prove that you deserved it because you don't have the grades to back you up, you've worked incredibly hard during a pandemic and deserve your place here even more as a result. The fact is that you got through an insanely rigorous applications process. You had interviews, you had tests, and that in itself is like a testament to your academic ability. And the other important thing to remember is that the percentage of students that receive a Cambridge offer and then miss out on their place because they missed their grades is very low. So almost in receiving a place at Cambridge, it's like a kind of confirmation that if you've been able to sit the exams, you likely would have got those grades.